Well, let's start it up. I want to personally watch this video because uh, based off the title, I think it aligns with what I think about Stephen A. Smith. So, let's get to it.
Kwame Brown is gone. The city of Angels, Hollywood, just should be celebrated. Throw a parade already, whether you win a championship or not. This man was a bona fide scrub. He
He
can't
can't
play. No
play.
disrespect whatsoever, but I'm sorry to tell everybody the truth. The man cannot play the game of basketball. He has small hands. He can't catch the ball. He's got bad feet. He can't really move, even though he's mobile. Doesn't really know what he's doing. Doesn't have a post move that he puts to memory that he can do 2 times in a row.
And I think that interview, that tangent specifically, is the reason why he got traded. I think that kind of ruined his career, in my personal opinion. Kobe saw that and he was like, interesting. Hey yo, we not gonna do nothing about this guy. Like, you heard Stephen A, right? You heard him, right? Okay, get this nigga out of here. That's probably what he said.
He has no game whatsoever, plays no defense, doesn't have the heart, the passion, or anything that comes with it. And you're asking me whether they gave up too much? Please, the Los Angeles Lakers knew exactly what they were doing. They should be celebrating right now, and Kobe Bryant should not be saying a word.
Stephen A. Smith is a man who needs no introduction. Whether you
The
love
hell? Why is
him
my shit
or
glitch?
hate him, you know who he is, or at least who he presents himself to be.
According to every study ever done. So the fact that David Stern, well, I mean,
It's not about us. It's about the money.
You don't want to make an enemy out of me.
His place in the evolution of sports media is like James Harden's place in the NBA's foul baiting revolution. And while I don't
Oh yeah.
personally think James Harden ruined basketball,
James Harden made foul baiting popular, but they were doing it beforehand. Jordan was doing it. Dwayne Wade was doing it. It's like there's always gonna be the person that does it first, and the person that makes it popular, and and it's like, and then that's when it becomes a problem. When the person does it to when the person is known for it and makes it popular. For example, Steph Curry in threes. When Drazen Petrovic was out here blicking threes in the 90s, that nobody said shit. But when Curry does it, oh my god, because he was the person who made it popular. Now remember that.
I do think that Stephen A. Smith ruined sports journalism. He has
Indubitably.
reactionary, over-the-top takes, whether he's
The
talking about
solitaire
a
shit I was
game that
talking
he
about.
didn't
Look at this
watch
shit, bro.
or running for president while getting paid tens of millions of dollars so ESPN can afford.
Damn. No, I hate on Rudy Gobert, but I thought Rudy Gobert was making more than that. God damn. Only making 36.5 million. Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't hate on Rudy Gobert so much. My fault, Rudy.
To lay off the real journalists. The influence of Stephen A. Smith on sports media and debate culture is undeniable, which is why ESPN felt it was appropriate to team up with him and his production studio to make a 3-part documentary on the history of sports media, past, present, and future, up for debate, the evolution of sports media. And spoiler alert, it's not good, and it paints an incomplete picture, with a lot of favoritism towards ESPN and Stephen A. And in between the lines of what Stephen A. has to say and up for debate, I think there's a lot more to read into. So welcome to the Stephen A. Smith Hater Manifesto.
Indubitably. Anyway. I think he kind of ruined sports media in general. Not just ESPN.
In a way, this docu-series is ESPN and Stephen A. Smith putting a stamp of approval on a brief history of sports media. For that reason, it's really closer to propaganda than real history.
Oh,
That was
stop it,
pure
you with this
lies.
nonsense.
It was-
Government
it was-
propaganda. I'm talking
right.
reality.
But to give it the benefit of the doubt, I'm gonna take it seriously and treat it like Stephen A. is basically taking a real position on the grand narrative of his industry, because he is. whether he likes it or not. It's presented like it's his story, and the production studio he owns is credited for producing it alongside ESPN. So, in the name of embracing debate, think of this as me debating the narrative presented in the documentary, because if I made a video on everything that I don't like about Stephen A. Smith, this video would be
Hours.
20 hours long. By limiting the scope of this video to being like 3/4 commentary on just this documentary, I think we can keep this one about an hour long or something like that. Stephen A. opens the documentary with a monologue where he basically takes the stance that he has an obligation to push the boundaries of debate, referencing
No,
the
he does
third
not.
rail, a metaphor that comes from the high voltage third rail in some electric railway systems that stands for any issue so controversial that it is charged and untouchable. Any politician or public official who dares to broach the subject will inevitably suffer politically. Stephen A. never claims to be the first guy to pledge allegiance to the third rail, though. In fact, he argues that this duty is a long-standing tradition in his field, citing other loudmouths of the past, segueing into the best part of this docuseries, where it tells an oral history of sports media through interviews of several members of the industry, with minimal appearances from Smith himself. The main exceptions being that opening monologue, followed by a cold shower grind set coded get ready with me segment, where it's set up like we're going to be looking at this evolution of sports media with one of its most pivotal figures, Stephen A. Smith, as our main character, or at least our main storyteller. But no, while we do see his morning routine, this is one of the only parts of the whole docuseries where we actually look at the career of Stephen A. Seriously, the tone is majorly implying that we're going to get some more insight into Stephen A.'s place in the evolution of sports media, not just his perspective, and it just never tries to do this sort of thing again. Instead, in episode 1, he directs our attention to his predecessors, citing Howard Cosell as one of his biggest inspirations.
As you know, the heavyweight champion of the world has just made his decision. He has rejected induction into the United States military
Oh,
forces.
What do you
Muhammad
want to be
Ali.
called now?
I was about to
Muhammad
say, what the
Ali or
hell's
Cassius
going on
Clay?
here?
Muhammad Ali.
And while he paints Cassell as an admirable figure, it doesn't help Stephen A.'s case by the end of the documentary, as after watching the full thing, this shout out to tradition comes off more like an eagerness to point the finger at others for the perpetuation of a tradition that he chooses to be a part of. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This episode is somewhat uncontroversial, as it is pretty easy to divide the history of anything into several schools of thought, and in the history of sports media, one way to divide historians could be ESPN-centric and non-ESPN-centric. And even still, there's plenty of people on both sides who would agree that ESPN kind of changed everything. The whole point of episode 1 is to look into the past, and it seems to do a pretty honest job of it, as they don't need to stretch the truth very much to paint a pretty picture of the history of sports media through the lens of ESPN in the 20th century. In the past, aka
ESPN.
before Stephen A. Smith, ESPN
I mean,
was kind of off.
ESPN, like the early 2010s. I remember. So I started watching basketball in 2013. You know, during the Miami Heat Spurs finals, we had a little desktop computer set up, and around like the early to the mid-ish 2010s, that was probably the best time to watch Sports Center, ESPN, all that shit. Cause early in the morning before I get to before I go to school, you know, we got or at night when they used to do the recap, you got ESPN, Scott Van Pelt, and then like in the middle of the day when I'm already at school, First Take, boom. However, I didn't really watch First Take like that, cause shit. Every time I did, this shit is ridiculous. Like it's just blasphemy.
Awesome. It was less a pillar of some big sports media industrial complex and more like a platform for sports journalists alongside the diverse range of sporting events on ESPN. They legitimately earned their role as the worldwide leader in sports by gambling on the market for such a product existing. And to give them even more credit, maybe they saw the writing on the wall that print journalism was on the way out, and they made a place where sports journalists didn't have to die alongside the newspaper. They built their platform off of a pretty mutually beneficial exchange between the workers, sports journalists, and their employers, the eventual juggernaut that was ESPN. I'm not meaning to suggest that the sports journalism industry is a beacon of fairness, or that ESPN was also the worldwide leader in workers' rights back in the day. Episode 1 is good, but it's not that good. No, when I
Oh, this
say
was a
it's a pretty
docu-series?
mutually beneficial exchange, what I mean is that the codependents on one another managed to work in a harmonious way that created a product that was very well received by sports fans at large. The quality of the roster of sports journalists and their ability to cover the game prolifically meant that journalists elevated the network while the network elevated the journalists. 24/7 news cycles were in their early infancy. CNN actually debuted the year after ESPN did, so this newborn media environment gave journalists the opportunity to take their talents to TV. Not all of these journalists were exactly known for their integrity, though. Stephen A. was not lying when he said that there is a tradition of grabbing the third rail in sports, and that sensationalism played a lot better on TV than in writing. The avalanche of debate
Yeah,
culture
it
didn't
definitely
happen all at
does.
once, but there was always room.
So, in sports media, a lot of time, people just say some outrageous shit for views and ratings. And you see it a lot more now. Because, let's be honest, 3 hours is a lot of time to talk about sports. Eventually, you're just going to get gassed out because if you have the same view like over and over again, nobody will care about your about the product that you're putting out. So you sometimes you have to what's the right word for it? Cater? I don't know what the right word for it is.
Room for a person who had an outlandish opinion to find a way on the air. This slow decay created space for chronic third rail grabbers to get a foot in the door. People come on TV from sports writing backgrounds only to hone their skills as talking heads in a ratings driven environment that cares more about profits than maintaining journalistic integrity. But these guys were the exception to the norm of sports media. They may define the industry today, but for decades and decades, they were the weird ones, the outliers. This pre-Stephen A. Smith portion of the evolution of sports media goes well out of its way to highlight how awesome ESPN was back in the day, strategically ignoring the thing that Stephen opens the episode with. It doesn't do almost anything to highlight the loudmouths of the past. It only even tries to do so in two ways other than mentioning Howard Cosell. First, in the beginning, during the morning routine segment, Stephen A. says he listens to sports radio every day, and it spends a couple minutes shouting out WFAN, the New York sports radio station where Up for Debate says all of modern sports radio can trace its origins. And second, towards the end, they shout out how important and fundamental Pardon the Interruption was in creating space for debate
Oh,
culture to thrive
pardon the
at ESPN.
interruption.
And while
Is
PTI and Mad Dog in the Morning are
pardon the interruption is like probably one of the first sports media shows that I've watched personally. I love it. The way that they do it, it is really great. I forgot the other one. There was another one where they would kind of have it was like kind of like a game show-ish, talk show. I don't know what you call it, where they would answer questions or something like that. Beat, and then they would get points and stuff for good talking points. I don't remember, but those two were really good.
influential in their own ways, neither of them are ever portrayed as particularly ugly or third-rail grabby. No, these shows are depicted as highly respected, and while they share some similarities to the debate shows of today, they're seemingly nowhere near as toxic, and they're barely presented in any light that makes them resemble the sludge of modern ESPN. It seems telling that in the portion of the documentary that's primary focus seems to be painting the prettiest picture, they leave out the ugliness that happens during this era until episode 2.
I believe that what you have seen debate television do, it has created an acidic, corrosive cruelty
Yes.
in how it is that we talk about athletes and games.
Stephen A. Smith might own up to being a professional rage baiter, but even with this acknowledgement, Up for Debate seems to go well out of its way to not cover the career of Stephen A. too closely, even as we approach the era in which he rose to star status at ESPN. It's especially noticeable when you compare it to the amount of time they instead spend on detailing the rise of his most notorious partner in crime, Skip Bayless. Frankly, you can't tell the story of Stephen A. without mentioning Skip Bayless, so it kind of makes
Skip Bayless, LeBron hater. That's all you need to know about him.
sense that episode 2 basically opens with a mini-doc about him. Skip himself was actually not interviewed for this documentary. That's in large part because the two were apparently not on speaking terms for a while between 2022 and 2025, and this doc was made in 2024. Despite not having an interview to add to the content of his segment, in terms of directly covering a single journalist's career, this doc 100% for sure spends more time focused on Skip than it does on Stephen A. Even just this 7 minutes does more to cover Skip's career than the entire 3 episodes does to cover Stephen A. Smith's. Hell, it spends more time focused on Skip than anyone, including basically everyone who does get the privilege of representing themselves. I actually made an original deep dive a long time ago detailing my perspective on Skip, but a lot has changed since then. Like, if this video was made then, it would be the First Take hater manifesto, but Skip isn't relevant like that anymore, and he isn't publicly daydreaming about running for president, so allow me to air out my grievances with Skip again while we go over how Up for Debate tells it. Skip's impact on the decay of sports journalism is right up there with Smith, but Up for Debate only really depicts Skip's career at ESPN and before his union with Stephen A. as a debate partner. So with this omission of Stephen A. from the story of Skip Bayless, it kinda paints Skip as the poster boy for debate culture on TV. Most of the doc is told in chronological order, and with Skip, it starts on October 20th, 2003, when Cold Pizza debuts. First Take before First Take, bright and early in the morning. Then it goes to when the show evolves into First Take, debuting on May 7th, 2007. But it actually doesn't mention that it was August 2011 when Skip's role at First Take saw a dramatic increase. Quote, its ratings jumped 58% for the 3-month period ending in April compared with the previous year. Nearly 500,000 people tuned in daily to watch the live broadcast of grown men loudly arguing about sports issues at the unlikely hour of 10 a.m. on the East Coast and the even more unlikely hour of 7 a.m. on the West Coast, unquote. In fact, no one really gets much mention of ratings influence besides for, of course, Stephen A. Smith. They are happy to point out the surge in viewership following his full-time status on the show towards the end of the Skip segment. So, instead of highlighting the catalyst in this kind of behavior from Skip, it points to an effect of that increase in relevance, as on September 14th, 2011, Chris Bosch came on to First Take to confront Skip Bayless for crossing the line.
Thought you were soft and passive and unaggressive.
You know, we're very prideful with the Bosch name, and I don't.
Oh, is this after 2011? Yeah. That's bad. That's
like
really
it
bad.
being made fun of.
You could shut me up at any time by simply performing.
This might be one of the most clear examples of the acidic, corrosive cruelty towards athletes that comes from debate TV culture as mentioned in the doc by Dan Levitard. I do gotta say this as well, just as a side note. Soft is one of the most empty, made up, nothing burger criticisms that exists. It's entirely arbitrary, entirely up to interpretation. Not a second of Skip's time is spent talking about how Bosch actually plays the game of basketball. It's just the hollow platitude of soft. An argument made by someone who doesn't know what they're talking about something that they couldn't even possibly know about outside of the surface level. Not that you should expect anything better than surface level out of this man. The documentary highlights that Skip Bayless wasn't playing a character, that it was really him that wouldn't back down from being a professional hater. But it's not like Skip is here to defend
Bayless
himself.
is
Then
like,
it wouldn't be so easy to pin most of the negativity of this industry onto him. Skip is a clown, and he has always been a clown. Unfortunately, he was the one to show Stephen A. the ropes in the world of clownery. All right, I guess it'd probably be more of a never-ending handkerchief than a rope. Anyways, the doc seems to finally be willing to talk about Stephen directly as it jumps to April 30th, 2012, when Stephen A. Smith was announced to be joining First Take on a permanent 5-day-per-week basis. Again, like I said, this is the first mention of First Take's ratings skyrocketing, and their final underhanded dig at Skip came when the doc claimed that Skip told Stephen A. that he needed him to take the show to the next level. All but depicting Skip as basically groveling to Stephen A. without ever showcasing
Skip?
why. Again,
No,
with
no, 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 no,
no
no, no.
Skip present to defend himself against.
No, 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 no. This is propaganda. Skip was the better. Let me. Yeah, Skip was the better sports commentator. I don't like saying that. Oh my god. But what ended up happening is Stephen A. overtook him with his own method. Skip went his own way because I don't know. He does what he wants to do. I guess he's an old man. Um, and I don't know. Something may have happened in the middle of that for one of them to be salty. And yeah,
Any of these narratives? Skip Bayless has actually disputed this version of events during the early days of their beefing era, years before Up for Debate was even released.
2012, they weren't satisfied with the numbers. They weren't satisfied with the ratings, the level of revenue that was being generated. Skip Bayless comes to me in the parking lot on the campus of ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut. And he says, I know you got your plans. You love the NBA. You love being out on the road. You love being in the locker room. But he said, but I need you. He said, I can't. I've done all that I could to take this as far as I could go. Thought about it for a couple of days. I said, all right, I'll do it. 1 month later, we were number one. And we've been number one ever since. And so when it skyrocketed to that point, it's like, shit, I didn't see this coming.
Stephen A. telling JJ Redick on the podcast that a month after he joined me, that we skyrocketed to number one, where First Take remains. What? As Stephen A. well knows, the only competition that First Take had at that point was Sports Center. There was no Undisputed. There was no Fox Sports 1. There was no competition to be found anywhere. We were competing with Sports Center.
yeah,
We had
he's
already
right.
crushed Sports Center. So how do you suddenly fall to number one? We had already done that.
Which Stephen A. posted a Notes app non apology to in response. But
Not
beef
surprised.
aside, okay, good. We've finally arrived at Stephen and Skip's first time together at First Take. Except, no. For some fucking reason, the doc takes a complete left turn and goes all the way back to April 6th,
The hell?
1994. Now they're
Why don't they
alluding
just
with
go
another
forward from there?
OG third rail grabbing sports guy, Jim Rome, referencing the time that he got blitzed by the quarterback of the Rams, Jim Everett, for disrespecting him to his face on Rome's TV show, with Everett even warning him before that he'd get physical if he disrespected him again. Rome, of course, went on instigating him, knowing that getting threatened would make good TV, especially if those threats turned into promises. The fact that this was left out
So
of
rage
episode
bait,
1 really
basically.
demonstrates how that idealized version of sports media of before does not include this kind of stuff. This organization of ideas is almost a clever sleight of hand if you're not paying attention to it. They set up this idea of Stephen A. Smith's tradition being an important part of the narrative in episode 1 just to obfuscate it to episode 2 when it's a convenient distraction from how Up for Debate is not telling the story of Stephen A.'s career, just everyone else's. So then we jump back to when Stephen A. Smith was on First Take, finally getting into some analysis of Smith's career for the first time, but for some fucking reason, we skip his time with Skip Bayless on First Take, pun intended, but seriously, they just cut that part of the story like entirely. Actually, scratch the like. We don't see any of Skip and Stephen A. doing their thing for more than just a couple of seconds.
So Stephen A. didn't want to skip on the on the on the docu-series, basically. That's what I'm hearing. He was like, nah, fuck it. And ESPN as the company, they're like, hey man, you're a star player. I agree. That's basically what I'm hearing.
Never is the story of these two and their inflammatory show depicted in the entire hour-and-a-half documentary. Instead, some of the only footage we see of Stephen A. on TV in any substantial sense is when he claims when debating Jay Williams that he's always triggered, and citing it as an instance of when it got personal, before using that to immediately segue to JJ Redick beefing with Kendrick Perkins on First Take right there in front of him in like 2023. This man wants to talk about personal beefs, and he can only cite some of the tamest shit I've ever seen on one of these shows. The same man who told Kevin Durant, "You don't want to make an enemy out of me," like he's a fucking mob boss.
You don't want to make an enemy out of me.
That
Bruh.
guy, that's all the beef
That's
he can
ridiculous.
reference. And then the only other example of a debate getting personal is something that doesn't involve you, something you were just a spectator for. If you are not paying close attention to the documentary, it'll be easy to miss how at every opportunity to actually cover the career of Stephen A. specifically, it seems to choose not to. You could maybe claim this to be Stephen just gracefully sharing the spotlight to smaller stars in the
Nah.
industry. Episode 1 highlights those who came before him. Episode 3 highlights what comes after. But this is the episode to talk about Stephen A. directly. And they don't look into any of this man's career besides for a passing mention. Instead, he takes a ton of the credit for making the industry what it is today without thinking too hard about what the industry is today. It's actually kind of hilarious that rather than truly highlighting Stephen A.'s predecessors, it instead points the finger at his most related peer while giving Skip as few flowers as possible. They honestly show more love to Jim Rome than Skip Bayless. It's kind of hilarious. It feels almost like Smith's criticisms of his chosen tradition and himself are directed at somebody he used to mirror in debate for hours a day, who's not even present to speak for himself. And when it's not pointing the finger at Skip, it's whoever else is at the table with him on First Take. This isn't a man who's afraid of the spotlight. He's not being humble. He's deflecting. His words say that he's proud of what his place in today's culture looks like, but when examining closely, his actions say otherwise. So far, there's basically been zero introspection or vulnerability from Stephen A. Smith. It's weird how a guy who seems to love the sound of his own voice refuses to tell the story of his own life in the context of the history he's living in the context of the history he claims to be proud of. It's insane how much he talks in this doc while saying virtually nothing. LeBron said something a while back that has always resonated with me. At the end of the day, it's just basketball. I don't think what Stephen
And people like to twist those words around because LeBron has also said, basketball is everything to him, something like that. But I think you gotta separate basketball, separate different areas of life. That's very important, very very important, because you as a person, you're not just basketball. Oh, I'm not. You're not just like a basketball lover. You like different things, right? Separate them. Okay, I like anime. Boom. I like gaming. Boom. I like, you know.
A did to sports media in a vacuum is a reason to hate the man. Don't get me wrong, it pisses me off to no end, but in some ways he opened the doors that I myself happen to walk through. And at the end of the day, sports journalism being in decline does stink, but there are a lot more important things to worry about. At the end of the day, it's just sports journalism. Or is it? My head, the fucking Vsauce music starts playing. The thing is, Stephen A. Smith and ESPN don't exist within a vacuum, just like sports. And this episode does delve into the conversation around sports and politics intersecting. For the most part, I agree with everything the documentary has to say about this particular subject. And there are naturally always people who get mad at that and say to keep politics out of sports. And to that I say, no. Whether you like it or not, sports and politics have always mingled. People don't exist within a vacuum. Politics affects everyone, whether you elect to stick
Ooh,
your head in the sand or elect a fascist. This doc echoes the same sentiment that I have for years now, specifically highlighting how athlete activism leads to awareness of issues being forced to the center stage.
And the one that I see doing this a lot is LeBron. I'm obviously not gonna say Candace Owens because she's way over there. Let's not focus on her. Let's ignore that side. But LeBron, even though he might do some questionable shit sometimes, uh, like that one police officer that tased the girl, I believe, and then LeBron saying you're next, and his support of China, which is it's understandable, he has to keep business relationships, things of that nature. So he's like, I can't say shit about China. But LeBron, whenever something goes on, he's always one of the first ones to say something about it. So, and that's something I can respect him for.
All of this is good. No notes. Well, actually, one note, which is that Stephen A. doesn't have a single extended clip of any of his political stances highlighted in this segment, after comparing his work in episode 1 to the reporter who was there for Muhammad Ali when he refused to go to Vietnam. But we'll get into Stephen's shitty politics and overall worldview later on. Where I split off entirely from the doc's perspective is when they discussed how ESPN had a wider impact on debate culture, spanning beyond sports and into the format of 24/7 propaganda machines, I mean news networks. It has this sort of full circleness with episode 1, where it begins with ESPN trying to be the CNN of sports, and leads into CNN trying to be the ESPN of politics. The implications of this are as interesting as they are horrifying. But the doc just glazes over the potential problems with this culture shift. Instead, it cites Jon Stewart going on CNN that one time.
Why do you argue? The two of you? It's not so much that it's bad as it's hurting America.
I love discussing
But,
politics through
like, bro, what?
sports, but I think we can all agree that we should not be discussing politics the same way we discuss sports. Grabbing the third rail when the rail only says Chris Bosh is soft is fine. Grabbing the third rail when it says, who cares about Epstein? I'm gonna party this weekend. Don't you have anything to do? Get a life.
Yikes.
That's not okay.
You're in an uproar off the Epstein list? That's all you've got? It's really, really surprising that this matters.
What do you mean that's all you got? That sounds a little suspicious. You don't want the list to get released or something? What's going on here?
Of course, I think there's a list, but I don't know. I suspect, but I have no knowledge, nor do I care. It's Friday night. I'm getting ready to
What? Nor do you care. Okay. This nigga's ridiculous. Oh my fucking god. All those victims and you don't care. Okay.
enjoy myself. I'm getting ready to have a nice weekend. I could give a damn about the client list, the Epstein client list. It has no effect on me whatsoever. I have a life. I don't understand for the life of me why this matters so much.
Then I start to actually hate this guy. And
Yeah,
I
that
start
shit is
to
actually
hate the
ridiculous.
degradation of sports media because it didn't just stop at sports media. All of media, journalism in general, is in steep decline. The sports debate format made it so that the
Because there's
discussion
no
wasn't
real
informed
integrity.
by the facts, but rather who had the better debate skills. And now in politics, in the media, in our hellish 24/7 news cycle, the facts don't matter, just how you can spin them. If you say the right series of words in the right way, anything can be the truth.
So narratives are really, really important. For example, in hip hop, Drake tried to spin the narrative saying, "Oh, Kendrick doesn't have the numbers. Kendrick doesn't have this. Kendrick doesn't have that. He lost. He went to the court case saying, "Oh, he did this, that, and the third. He called me a pedophile. Oh my God, how could you? How could you do that to me?" Spinning narratives. Every which way he tries to spin narratives. Look at his album rollout, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I don't necessarily consider that an album rollout. You know, he tries to spin narratives. Pinocchio. What does he mean by Pinocchio? Interesting. And things of that nature. And that happens with every fucking thing in this world. Everything. People are trying to spin narratives. People are trying to rewrite history. And the moment that we let that happen is the moment this world is cooked. Especially this generation. This generation. Oh my god. We might have it the worst. And I always say there's always a generational divide. So with that generational divide, we have to go through so much bullshit. And then what about us? What about when it's our turn? And we have to do something because every other generation was just bullshitting and they couldn't get shit done because they catered to big corporations instead of what the American people want. Well, what happens then? We end up with the same cycles, die, repeat itself, same cycles, die, repeat itself, over and over again till world end. That don't seem like a great life to live.
You're a well-spoken, confidently wrong guy, then you can own some unprepared good faith opposition. And then your perspective is the truth now to some people just because you came off more compelling. It's sophistry, it's ugly, and it ends lives, sometimes even during a debate. Politics isn't about what's right, it's about who's dunking on each other harder with their sick memes and rhetorical skills. It's gross. And the fact that this doc presents this influence as a good thing, like it's something to be proud of, it's actually
Propaganda.
sickening to me.
Propaganda.
Up for debate makes it clear that Stephen A. Smith's
Propaganda.
ideology is that things are good or
Propaganda.
bad based on scale, not any kind of moral judgment, and certainly not based on any kind of self-reflections, and even more certainly not based on any kind of journalistic principles. Oh look, CNN is talking about genocide, the same way that I would talk about if LeBron is clutch or not. Look at how influential this is. Look at how big our impact on the media landscape is. Isn't it so big, so large? I mean, damn, what an impact. Look at the size of the influence. Never even considering that maybe this big impact is closer to an Oppenheimer kind of impact than, like, I don't know, the guy who invented penicillin by accident. Which is probably why Stephen A. is the only journalist present in the doc that appears to be actually excited about the future of sports media, as the edit features a montage of ex-players and others debating on podcasts. The journalists in this doc don't get that many criticisms about the current state of sports media left in the edit. I mean, there's some, but to
I
me,
made
that
videos
means
about
that there
current
was
states of
so
sport
much
media.
more of
I
it that
fucking
they
hate it.
felt
I
obligated
really
to
do.
leave
I
some
really
of it
do.
in. But even everything good or neutral they say is paired with a kind of defeated look in their eyes. All of them look like they just got back from a tour in Nam. But for Steven, this isn't the monster that killed his career as he knew it. Instead, it's the monster that he created to propel his career beyond anything a sports journalist could ever dream of. He reportedly makes $40
I already
million
seen
per
this
year,
graphic.
way more than
That's
most
still
star
insane.
athletes. Even since taking a slight step back from being the top dog at ESPN to give him time to focus on his own podcast, where he discusses politics and interviews guys like Eric Adams in softball quasi debates. The future of sports journalism isn't journalism at all. For the real journalists featured in this doc, they seem put off by this, even if they don't get to air out their grievances much. But Steven can only look at this apocalyptic landscape of his own making and smile. Look at how big that impact
I mean,
is.
shit, he's getting his money. That's all that matters to him. But that's sad. That's really
Episode
sad.
3 is the most useless piece of shit out of all of this useless piece of shit of a documentary. Episode 1 is admittedly pretty good, but episode 2 bends over backwards to avoid its most prolific, consequential, and controversial character, the guy who's producing the fucking thing. It's also
I
just
wonder why.
propaganda. I mean, this doc in total
Interesting.
maybe gives 5% of the time to dissenting opinions about modern sports media. Dan Levitard has said that his interview was barely used in the documentary. The clip that we open chapter 2 with is the only brief moment of catharsis throughout the whole doc.
Because they don't want the truth.
Finally, a guy who shares an alternative, non-sycophantic perspective gets a word in, but that's it. A word. He's basically the loudest and most present voice suggesting that embracing debate might have been a mistake. It actually opens episode 2 by acknowledging how Dan and Stephen A. fundamentally disagree on the state of sports media. A few times, Stephen A. acknowledges his naysayers, but he arguably misrepresents them, and in the final episode basically says, go cry about it if you don't like it. I so desperately want to play the clip here because it's really funny how nonsensical it is, while there's generic dramatic music playing in the background over it. Unfortunately, we got a manual claim on our Shaq video, so I'm not making that same mistake again. But as I read these words, pay attention to just how much Steven is saying nothing here. He basically says that we have a duty, not just the media, all of us have a duty, quote, as a child of humanity, to look at us and hold us to the standard of making sure that whether you agree or disagree with us, Do you look at us and feel that we are doing things that serve the betterment of the whole? That's
When
what
has that
Howard
been the
Cosell was
case?
thinking when he stood up for Muhammad Ali, unquote. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with the notion that people should consume content more responsibly and hold the people they feed their attention to accountable. And I mean, they are. First Take started to die after Stephen A. kicked out Max Kellerman for embarrassing him too much.
Mentioned, obviously, Max
Yeah,
wanted to
Matt
get in there. Like I said,
Kellerman was
I'm in the
really good.
streets. Max almost seems
First
blacker
Take.
than you, Stephen A. with what he's coming, with his commentary.
And Stephen definitely does not have the same cultural influence that he did a couple of years ago when Skip was
Even
on and First Take was in
Molly,
its prime.
Molly even left First Take recently, pretty recently. So First Take is about to die out. Just give it a couple more years, dead, dead on impact, dead on arrival. It's gone. That's my personal opinion on First Take. Then what will Stephen A. do? He'll probably lean more into politics. Probably start bullshitting with politics. Make a bag off of that. So many options. So many options.
That said, the man is exceptionally good at saying the right annoying thing to maintain relevance, to the tune of $40 million a year, no less. Episode 3 is bad because it's a sloppily thrown together edit that is just designed to promo a bunch of different independent shows. Once again, we can interpret this charitably and say that Smith just wanted to be nice and give his friends a spotlight at the end, but this is a fucking hater manifesto, so I'm not gonna interpret it charitably. Stephen A. does seem excited for the future of sports media, but it's not really for noble reasons. First of all, this new media environment has led to an absolutely insane amount of wealth and fame for him. But second of all, he seems to view this as a challenge, like he wants the challenge of new competition, of new blood. I mean, that's what he's more or less saying is his motivation. I do think he was trying to come off cool, so he could just be bullshitting. But if it is sincere, I still don't think I'm excited about the future of sports media because I want to prove I'm still better than all of them is like a noble motivation. The other
That's not
thing that
really
irks
noble
me
at all.
about it is they specifically only highlight forms of media that are not really direct competitors to ESPN themselves. It's all podcasts, specifically focusing a lot on Shannon Sharp, which
Podcast is
yikes.
something
And when
different.
doing that, they also really only highlighted his
Also,
celebrity interview.
Shannon Sharp, he got his own problems to be dealing with. Him and his woman. That's what I'm gonna say. His woman, allegedly, you know. And he ended up losing money due to that. Allegedly.
Again, something that is non-competitive with ESPN. And the thing that really irked me, yes, you heard that right, I was double irked, is that they featured Kenny in this doc, King of the Fourth Quarter.
Well, Kenny is like one of the most. He's the most one of the most reputable people out of this space, this analyst space, because he actually watches the games. You could tell he actually watched the game. You could tell he has a passion for it. You could tell that if he had the opportunity to fucking be in the NBA finals, he wouldn't play solitaire while the game is going on. You could tell that. And he's been doing that shit for years. He's been making GM 2K videos for years. Like I have a lot of respect for Kenny, and I think that's what sports media should shift to. Not this bullshit we have going on.
Not as an interview or anything, no, that would have maybe actually been interesting, which this episode is trying desperately not to be. They mentioned Kenny once and show him on screen a few times, but the clips they use are from a rebuild in 2K.
Bruh.
I realize this is a small thing, but the more I thought about it, the more it annoyed me. I think it's pretty underhanded to be like, look at the future of sports media. A guy playing 2K. I love Kenny's 2K rebuilds as much as the next guy, but Come on,
The
I
fuck
don't
is that?
think this is the best representation of his place in sports media. Like I said, I'm probably reading into that a little bit more than I should, but man, I did not care for it.
Yeah,
Something else that I
that
also
seems wrong.
read as a little underhanded to me was calling all of this stuff the future when it's literally happening
The
right
present.
now. It gets into how social media democratizes discourse in a way that was impossible to imagine when Skip and Stephen A first taked. And it gets into athletes making their way into the media. Probably the most interesting thing.
Yeah, athletes making their way in the media. That and nepotism are good. I wouldn't say huge, but big parts of sports media. You know, Shaq. They offer him a bag. A lot. They're like, here, here's your money. Hey, won't you come on this show with some former players and Ernie? No, you could really make an impact here. Give him some 30 million, about 30 million. Aye. And he say whatever the fuck he want on that show. For what, 20 years? How long Shaq been on? Nah, Shaq been retired for like what, 15 years? About to be 15 years. So like 8-ish, 9-ish years. I think he was on TNT with that show, and it's happened multiple times. Football players, basketball players, there's it's mainly those, to be honest. It's mainly football and basketball players that become analysts elsewhere, and you know they get their bag there. There's nothing wrong with it, but you know you got to show you have a passion for the game, and you got to show you actually watch the game. You can't just be bullshitting around.
Stephen A says on the whole doc isn't even from his interview. It's an old clip from when he had a conflict with Jalen Rose.
Media can't have it both. No, hold on. Stop with that media. Where you working at?
Not only is it interesting, but dare I say it, Stephen A. Smith is right. I, for the most part, am glad to see players entering the media space, but what I do not like is how many of them join the space with a severe amount of arrogance about how sports media mistreats and misrepresents athletes, only for them to do the exact same thing on their own
Boom.
platforms.
Every time we see you, you're working out at another place. We never see you in the Hulk's arena working out.
Steven isn't mad to be called the media because he's offended by the label. He's mad because Jalen says it in a way that implies that he's anything different. It's not fair for Jalen to refer to Steven as the media like he isn't the media himself. If you're going to do full-time commentary, whether you like it or not, you're a part of the group, especially if you put on a suit and tie on literally an ESPN show. That said, I think the wave of athletes making their own shows stemmed from a resentment towards figures like Stephen A. Smith.
Yeah, it did.
Oh, and also money. It's a pretty easy way
That
to
too.
make a lot of money. Or to become a lolcow. I guess that's more points for Stephen A. in the influence department.
Podcast P. Shiz, I mean, he can never stay healthy. He's always on the podcast, this, that, and the third. And that's just gonna become more prevalent. I'm surprised the Beat hasn't done it yet. I mean, he got paid 60 minutes, so he probably don't give a fuck about no podcast. And plus, it seems like Embiid values his space, his distance from everyone and everything. So Embiid probably
He
doesn't have the
lied and
personality for that.
exaggerated so
But
flagrantly for
nonetheless,
so long that athletes said, fuck it, we're getting our voice in the ring then. For the most part, I respect that. But I do agree with Steven in that exchange with Jalen Rose. If you're getting down in the pits with us, you can't act like you're above the pit. That said, it hadn't even occurred to me how little athlete representation there was in this. By little, I mean, I think the only athlete featured for an interview in the first 2 episodes was Troy Aikman talking about the dude who tackled Jim Rome. And then there's like one short clip of Matt Barnes. In episode 3, Matt comes on and says, yeah, this shit is annoying from a player perspective. And then he talks about weed. Again, something I respect very much, but I don't respect the choice from the producers to not get anything beyond the surface level here from the athletes. It's basically like, look at the good that can come from the wide world of debate, Matt Barnes can tell Stephen A about the historic racism around weed off camera and reflect on that conversation in this documentary. Yay. The only really noteworthy acknowledgement from this episode is about how the introduction of more and more ex players as the faces of ESPN and sports media in general does even further limit the space for actual sports journalists. Before, you were competing with loudmouth jackasses with raging Adderall and ratings addictions. Now you're competing with those jackasses and players. Oftentimes, they're both.
We never see you in the Hulk's arena working out.
As much as I am one for player empowerment, losing the principles of journalism in favor of putting mostly ex-players at the debate table so they can grab the third rail over and over and over again has been a losing situation for everyone involved. It's lined a few pockets, but it's
Yeah,
given Kevin more
because
opportunities.
a lot of times people see players, people who play the game as more reputable. As and they're like, oh my God, it's Michael Jordan. That would never happen on a broadcast team. Oh my God, wow, he should know a lot about basketball, right? And that's just exactly the way it is.
Opportunities than it's created, and it's certainly been poisonous to the discourse. All the while weekly quoting moments from interviews with new media people about how traditional sports journalism will always be there without recognizing how they are actually just threatening the future of it, like how TV threatened the newspaper. ESPN has gone from a beneficial, rational business model for the most part to something that's forced to degrade itself for the sake of maximizing profits in the wake of debate culture that itself claims it had to do with creating. Now, ESPN shows feature analysts looking to say the most inflammatory thing possible in hopes that some dumbass TikTokers and YouTubers react to it. Oh, I can't really do a fake gulp. Gulp. And then, when they get a
I don't
crazy
know if y'all got,
response,
but
now the
I did a
show
cool.
is about the
Cause why not?
reaction to the show or someone else's show. It's very cyclical.
So much of the sports coverage is not did they win the game, but did you win the argument that you were having with the media member across from you about the game?
I can empathize with having to fill airtime, especially on that scale, because I might post pretty frequently, but I'm not doing hours of programming every day. That shit is intense. But it's
Yeah,
hard
that
not to
that's
feel
that
like over
seems like
time, the sports debate show format, and ESPN specifically, has just become a clown show competing for who can honk their big red nose the loudest. And that downward trajectory into the pit we're in now has become pervasive in our culture. Things are being dumbed down to the lowest possible denominator. We exist in a take culture, a take economy. I mean, shit, I just made a short form channel just for me reacting to hot takes. As much as I hate this game, I've also cursed myself into having to play it. Again, if it was possible for this kind of style to just stay in the sports world, then I'd be more annoyed than pissed off. But it's not, and it feels like every day we stray further and further from caring about what's right to instead caring about who was better at arguing. And all of that sure as shit isn't doing anything to honor the ideals that made ESPN a pillar of the industry in the first place, in favor of cultivating heated debates and succumbing to the clip farming industry norms of today. Grabbing the third rail over and over again to please your shareholders is the core problem with debate culture today, because it puts the incentive to sensationalize before the duty to the truth. As many good things as this accessibility has
sensationalization starts wars. It really does. Big headlines, accusations thrown, starts wars. It That's how they get their money worth. And shareholders look at that and say, "Ooh, I like that. Because what does war do? War brings profit. It always brings profit.
Spawned, as much as it has benefited me personally, it has come at the cost of the truth. The solace that I take in all of this is that this degradation has led to direct consequences for ESPN. Their relevance is in decline, and they persistently make terrible decisions like firing Zach Lowe while giving Stephen A blank check for his salary. The way they approached the attention economy is vapid and short-sighted. Honestly, ESPN has become a lolcow in its own way. Their only relevance to die-hard real sports fans is when we laugh at them. That's quite the fall from grace. And unfortunately, I think they kinda brought down American society with it. At the very least, it actually played a pretty damn big part. People talk about how we're more divided than ever, which isn't true. Americans actually agree on quite a few things, including universal healthcare, gun control laws being far too loose, Israel committing genocide. We just have politicians who don't care to represent the people. And it benefits them to say that the other side is at fault, when in reality, it's both of their faults. Also, like, there was a civil war, guys. But the
Yeah.
sentiment that we're more divided than ever is
Yeah.
symptomatic of how the importance of integrity in media has been eroded by the rat race to the most sensational point possible. How social media algorithms put us into echo chambers, and that for a lot of people competing for your attention, they don't care about
Man,
the
this video
truth,
about to be
but
damn near
what's
2 hours. Oh
profitable.
well, fuck it.
And Stephen
We
A.
ball.
Smith is one of those people.
That Kellerman offers too much nuance, so we have to make it in the form of entertainment. We have to. It's not that it's ignored; it's that the journalism becomes less important. It's the argument, it's the sparks, it's the debate that needs to be carried.
Yeah, but where you're missing the boat, and I'm actually surprised that you're missing it, Dan, is that it's not about us. It's about the money.
The way Steven tried to bookend this documentary truly blew my mind. It closes just as it opens,
You blow
with a
my
Stephen A.
mind. My
Smith
fault.
monologue where he basically just puts the onus on the viewer to not watch sensational TV if they want less sensational TV. He describes great sports journalists of the past in a continuation of the quote we opened the chapter with, saying, "These people cared about the standard or elevating it in their own way. And even though we might do things differently today, we can never forget it. Never forget that you have an obligation to uplift, not to squash." Which, huh? What?
That sounds
Which is it,
goofy.
Steven? Are we
That's
obligated to
narcissism.
third rail it as a sports journalist? Or are we supposed to uplift and not squash? You realize that's impossible, right? What is the clip that makes Stephen A. Smith's career blow up? What is considered basically the
Kwame
best
Brown.
moment of his entire career? Oh yeah, it was this.
Is that a trick question? You tell me. They gave up Kwame Brown. Who rounders? I could care less.
Bona fide
First of
scrub.
all, understand
He
something.
can't
When you give up
play.
first round picks, if you are a quality team in playoff contention, it really doesn't mean that much. That's number one. Number two, and more importantly, Kwame Brown is gone. The City of Angels, Hollywood, just should be celebrated. Throw a parade already, whether you win a championship or not. This man was a bona fide scrub. He can't play. No disrespect whatsoever, but I'm sorry to tell everybody the truth. The man cannot play the game of basketball. He has small hands. He can't catch the ball. He's got bad feet. He can't really move, even though he's mobile. Doesn't really know what he's doing. Doesn't have a post move that he puts to memory that he can do 2 times in a row. He has no game whatsoever. Plays no defense. Doesn't have the heart, the passion, or anything that comes with it. And you're asking me whether they gave up too much? Please, the Los Angeles Lakers knew exactly what they were doing. They should be celebrating right now, and Kobe Bryant should not be saying a word.
I'm not saying he was wrong about Kwame here, and I
He
can't
wasn't
deny the
wrong,
clip is very
necessarily.
funny. But it sure as fuck looks a lot more like squashing than uplifting to me. Why are your peers calling your methods acidic, corrosive cruelty? Is that typically something that is said of someone whose life philosophy is to uplift and not squash? What the fuck are you talking about? You talk about how important it is that your peers have standards about viewers needing standards, but then go on to celebrate a potential future where we sacrifice those standards for the sake of having a more diverse potpourri of master debaters on our screen? Why do you have no apparent interest in taking responsibility for your influence? What are you so scared of, man? Do you not like the person who you see in the mirror? Are you ashamed of your place in the culture? If Stephen A. isn't ashamed, he did a damn good job of coming off that way. He gives lame, sheepish excuses for his jackassery, and the editing is extremely selective to silence the critics and keep the spotlight far from the ugly side of Stephen A. Smith's career. So if he won't talk about it, I will.
And I decide to play a little solitaire, which, by the way, I always do.
Stephen A. Smith is a journalist, at least by title. But it would be
Come
more
on.
accurate to say that Stephen A. was a journalist. He's a journalist in the same way that Dr. Oz is a doctor. Dr. Oz was a doctor, and now he's a pill pusher on cable. Something like the title of journalist isn't just bestowed.
I don't know. What is it called when your title is like, it's just for show? It's like, there's trophy wife, there's, shit, I forgot what it's called, man. Fuck.
And then by default, all of your actions are deemed journalistic from then on.
Have you been inside a locker room? Have you been courtside and seen some of these dudes? I'm telling you right now, Matt. Here's what I'm telling you. Well, whatever.
When Stephen A. Smith was coming up, he was absolutely a journalist. He is right when he says he put in the work to get the opportunities that he did. He got there the quote unquote right way. He's a journalist who put in the work in print to earn his spot on television. You might think that that's a success story in the field of sports journalism, but well, this video wouldn't exist if it was. It's not a success story for sports journalism if he betrays every semblance of journalistic principles that he may or may not have
Ronald Reagan
ever even cared about. Throughout this documentary, what really gets to me is how Stephen clearly fancies himself a pillar in the industry that
if you
has
know, you know.
continued the legacy of those who came before him. He seems to think that he's done a really good job of passing that torch successfully. But the reality of this timeline is more like he was passed the torch along with his elderly counterpart. He broke away from Skip's wrinkly-ass hand, held on to the torch some more, but took really poor care of it, didn't handle it with respect, bastardized it and tossed it away. Then he went and picked it up and passed that broken, nasty torch onto a lot of people who probably shouldn't have been given the torch in the first place. The thing is, I'm no journalist, so why am I bent out of shape? Well, to put it plainly, I've always admired the profession, especially the idea of what it was before I was born. Then over the course of my life, the power and influence of those way more often principled voices slowly faded into a distant memory. Celebrity journalists of the past at least seemed to care about seeking the truth, and offensiveness was just something that came along with that. Whereas today, people like Stephen A. Smith just live to offend because it makes money. And it isn't just Stephen A. Smith, as debate slop has slowly but surely taken over the internet, and debate lords are being treated like biblical martyrs and messiahs. That's just my broader perspective. The more personal one is, I know a lot of sports writers. Some are friends that I know well, others are acquaintances that I have a lot of admiration for, and a lot more are people that I've never interacted with but still do kick-ass work. These are people who love the game of basketball, people who love sports. They love it, they have talent for it, and increasingly, they have no home to showcase this work that isn't a platform that they've had to build all on their own, hoping that one day an ESPN-like company comes along and gives them a chance. And even the most successful among them have had their jobs taken away because they didn't do a good enough job of emulating the clown, or they presented some actually authentic perspective that doesn't align with the company. ESPN's ratings are nowhere near what they once were, and they lay off more and more people. but somehow Stephen A's salary just gets bigger and bigger. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't strictly Stephen's fault. The core of this issue is in the people who ultimately decided that Stephen's brand of journalism was to be rewarded, while Zach Lowe's shall not. Who makes that decision and who should make that decision is something that's up for debate. But in the world as it is, its integrity be damned when you got ratings to worry about. Profit is the North Star, nothing else. Though I gotta say, I don't think this is a remotely sustainable plan in the long term. I really don't think this is a job that is meant to have a figure as large as Stephen A. Smith. This is an industry that would most ideally have a handful of stars of pretty equal footing. Stephen has slowly but surely taken up more and more of the spotlight and casted a wider and wider shadow over everyone else. He takes up space in terms of salary, in terms of airtime, in terms of relevance in the discourse. The man has become bigger than sports journalism, but he had to kill it in the process. Instead of regional
Yeah,
experts in
that's
specific areas of sports getting airtime, these types are relegated to being Stephen A's prep guy. Big pundits who are expected to cover.
you become big, and in the process, you try to kill what the same things that make you big, that made you big, that made you powerful. Let me not say powerful. That made you successful. Where have we seen this story before?
Nearly all sports don't just become experts in all sports, they get fed information by experts and then perform that debate. And I think people miss when the real sports journalists could shine. I was thrilled by the Kawhi scandal that happened in early September, not just because it was some news that I could cash in on during a dead off season, but because of the type of scandal that it was, punching up at billionaires, playing unfairly and exposing truths no matter how it might threaten the status quo. It wasn't manufactured rage bait to react to, it was real journalism. This was exposed by Pablo Torre, and
Pablo
it
Torre is
became
one of
the
the best
biggest story of
journalists.
the offseason, like by
Kawhi,
far. And the man
Kawhi
at the
saved the
center
trees.
of it was a freaking journalist who
That's
did
hilarious.
some journalist shit. I think the
And you know what's
reaction by a
crazy?
lot of people,
Since Adam
fans,
Silver has
media,
no
and
spine,
players
nothing will
alike,
happen.
really showcased just how much journalism as a concept in our society has decayed. Calling the man a snitch for investigating fraud conducted by the seventh richest man on earth? Like, that's just what journalists are supposed to do. Your job as a journalist is to stick your nose where it's unwanted. Now, I don't expect every sports journalist to go out here exposing shit like this, because there probably can't be that many stories out there like this. But then again, that could just be because there aren't that many people looking for these kinds of stories anymore, because it's not profitable. Pablo unfortunately couldn't have even managed this feat if not for Dan Levitard, who funded his operation. Torre has worked with ESPN, but his flagship show where he's been covering this story is outside of ESPN and under Levitard's media network. It takes an independent guy with a strong conviction for journalism and decades of experience to independently choose to sponsor this sort of project. Of course, it wasn't going to be ESPN that does it. How many clips does Pablo even have of him yelling or making a funny face? How are we supposed to meme this, Pablo? I was very happy to see this success for Torre, in large part because this kind of thing is what we are robbed of now. But also because it kind of proves a theory that I have had about the sports analyst slash journalist job for a while now. These kinds of efforts from Pablo weren't so foreign in the past. And what also wasn't as foreign is journalists poking their noses where it's unwanted and finding out some wild shit. Don't get me wrong here, there is more constant scandal than ever before. So much that it's overwhelming. But a lot of it is self inflicted or a
Yeah.
product of our modern surveillance state and vastly over exaggerated by outrage culture. This is anecdotal, but there are so many wild ass stories in the history of the NBA and sports in general that are only known because of some nosy ass journalists. There are more stories now, but the story is that, like, someone said something on a podcast. It doesn't really hit the same. Manufactured debate drama doesn't have as much meaning as real journalism. 100 different first take segments doesn't have as much significance as just this one story. Now, I realized long ago that many of my issues with Steven could be very easily deemed as hypocritical. I'm not a journalist after all, and yet here I am taking up space in an avenue that was pretty clearly created in part by Steven's influence. All of that is undeniably true, but to be honest, I have my own internal conflict about exactly that. Oftentimes, I doubt myself, my ability, and whether I even have the right to exist in this space. But through that internal struggle over the years, I do personally believe that I have refined my ability both as an observer of the sport and also a communicator about it. I realized that I kind of felt gross about how I would sometimes speak about athletes in my late teens and early 20s. And as my worldview shifted, I got more and more principled in my approach to this silly little job of mine. I may not be a journalist, but I do my best to be as principled as possible in this niche, which I wish wasn't like coming off as a brag because that should just be the standard. But those standards have been eroded. I was not good at my job for many years. I do not like watching shit from any earlier than like 2023. But through those trials, the number one most important thing to me was trying to be respectful and thoughtful in my commentary, especially with regards to the players. I also
This is why in my NBA predictions video, I include things that may happen, like Andrew Wiggins and his family. Boom. Because a lot of people won't do that. A lot of people, they have tunnel vision and they don't look at external factors as to why players might perform badly or might not been ever present the whole season. No, sports journalism has no mercy for players. They have no mercy for anything whatsoever. They don't look at it from a human perspective. They look at it from the perspective of, listen, he's a basketball player. We're gonna focus on basketball only. Fuck that. Fuck everything else.
also grew my contempt for Steven and Skip and their imitators throughout this time and vowed to not be like them, to not have takes for the sake of saying something controversial. I try my hardest to mean what I say and say what I mean. My word is the most important thing to me. I try to be as forthright as possible, as level headed as possible, and never cross the line with players where criticisms of their games turn into something weird and personal. I criticize players all the time, that's a part of the job, but I pay close attention to the lines that should not be crossed. Stephen A. Smith is a habitual line stepper. He does it all the time. He's crossed lines with players before. I've already mentioned it, but seriously, what the hell was he saying to KD that was just weirdo behavior?
You don't want to make an enemy out of me.
But where he's really
Yeah,
crossed
that's
the
weird.
line in the past is when he steps outside of the sports bubble. Stephen A. Smith was seemingly everywhere even before I became an adult, but his presence has really become oversaturated in recent years. Not necessarily in
Yeah, his
terms of
presence is very
relevance,
much so
but in
felt.
terms of the sheer amount of yappage that this man gets off. I mean, he is talking all day, every day. It is hard work to be as dedicated as he is to quantity, but on the other hand, it comes at the consequence of sacrificing quality. Again, we see the big equals good theory at play. And I think a less reductive way to phrase that could be that when it comes to journalism, Stephen A. cares about the means way more than the ends. Stephen A. says a lot. So many words leave that man's mouth every day. But he simultaneously says so little. He has prioritized saying as much as possible over valuing his word and saying things as meaningfully as possible. In fact, I wouldn't even say it's really prioritizing because that implies that one gets more over the other. No, he has sacrificed quality at the altar in exchange for as much quantity as possible. He's
Yeah.
chasing growth for growth's sake, change for the sake of change, not in the name of progress, not in honor of the.
The thing is, even as a content creator, you can't do that. It's okay to have some days where you just can't think of something. So be it. So be it. So be it. You know. But if you're gonna post a video every single day, you sacrifice quality, sacrifice what you want to say because you don't think for when you're making a video. That's just not right. That's just not right. Me personally, my videos are kind of mid because I don't really edit that much. You know, I might throw in a funny meme here and there every like 3 videos. Wow, interesting. Whoa, oh my god. But other than that, nah. But the things that I say in my videos are very are very true to me. I'm trying to be as authentic as possible. And then there's a lot of people who don't do that. A lot of people see dollar signs and they say, I'll say whatever you want for the right price. I think media in general has an authenticity problem. That and streaming. Oh my god, the authenticity is crazy, crazy bad. Like, they're scared of not getting deals from companies. They're scared of losing sponsors. They're scared of, and you shouldn't have to walk around with all those burdens on you. You you should just be able to say what you gotta say it with your chest. That's the problem. I'd rather be authentic than get money. I would rather that. I'll take authenticity 10 times over 10 the money. So be it if I'm broke. It be like that sometimes.
The truth, it is just for the sake of making money off of reaching for the third rail.
It's not
Boom.
about us. It's about the money.
That's fine when he's on sports shows. He'll go on there and say some dumb things, get clowned on Twitter for it a little or whatever, but like nothing too serious. As long as he keeps the energy up, gets a few solid clips in, and maybe even a meme out of it, he's done his job. Who cares? But unfortunately, this same approach really falls apart when you're discussing delicate subjects. Steven is
Politics,
often
religion,
caught
so and so.
tactless in situations where tact would be really fucking useful. It's actually impressive how much he manages to put his foot in his mouth in a far more flagrantly offensive manner the moment the topic resembles something serious. Now, he's done this in the past.
But what I've tried to employ the female members of my family, some of who you all met and talked to and what have you, is
Holy
that again, and
quality,
this is
what the fuck? Damn.
what I've done this all my life. Let's make sure we don't do anything to provoke wrong actions. Because if I
ESPN
come
suspension.
or somebody else
I
come
even
with
know
this
that.
law enforcement
I don't know how many times I have to reiterate. Mm, mm, okay. So you're saying you're gonna beat the ass, basically, and get arrested for assault or whatever. Okay.
officials, your brother.
Should I break it down? So basically, you're saying, he doesn't want to have to put his hands on somebody because they put their hands on his significant other, sister, whatever, family member. Um, do I think it should have been said? Not really, but I understand it.
Or the fellas that you know, if we come after somebody has put their hands on you, it doesn't negate the fact that they already put their hands on you. So let's try to make sure that we can do our part in making sure that that doesn't happen. Now, you got some dudes that are just horrible and they're going to do it anyway. And there's never an excuse to put your hands on a woman. But domestic violence or with or whatever the case may be, with men putting their hands on women is obviously a very real issue in our society. And I think that just talking about what guys shouldn't do, we got to also make sure that you can do your part to do whatever you can do to try to make sure it doesn't happen. We know they're wrong. We know they're criminal. We know they probably deserve to be in jail. In Ray Rice's case, he probably deserves more than the 2-game suspension, which we both acknowledged. But at the same time, we also have to make sure that we learn as much as we can about elements of provocation. Not that there's real provocation, but the elements of provocation, you got to make sure that you address it, because what we
Now,
got to
what
do
is
is
he
do what
talking
we
about
can
now?
to try to prevent the situations from happening in any way. And I don't think that's broached enough, is all I'm saying.
But he's been especially adept at putting his foot in his mouth in recent years as his volume has increased. The more Steven talks, the more controversies he starts, and none of them were worse than this shit a few months ago.
You're in an uproar
I
off
want to
the
skip this
Epstein
section.
list.
That's some
That's
bullshit.
all you've got?
Now, Steven defends this by saying that he was talking to Trump fans specifically in this clip, and to be fair, he does build up to this moment from that standpoint, but that's not where he's at by the end.
I'm getting ready to go out and enjoy myself. I'm getting ready to have a nice weekend.
Is
I
that
can give a
Cuomo?
damn about the the Epstein client list. It has no effect on me whatsoever. I have a life. I don't understand for the life of me why this matters so much.
Yeah, at the end there, he expresses how much
Insanity.
he didn't care, how unbothered he was. And his argument is so poorly reasoned and strangely worded that he denigrates the context of what he's saying. His tact is so poor that it farms clips while conveniently giving him plausible deniability. Steven has sunk his teeth into politics more and more lately, and it has not gone well for anybody but his accountant. He even floated the idea of being president one day, which unfortunately resulted in me having one of my worst takes in a while, which is that I kind of liked the idea. Not of him winning, but at least him running. At first, he seemed like, just based on his sports personality, that he'd be a far more belligerent and charismatic Democrat, something that I have been hoping to see for a while. Democrats need
If Bernie didn't win it, nobody's winning it.
more people on stage calling out their neoliberal bullshit. Their unwillingness to accept criticism and embrace the actual left leaning audience that was dying for representation is why they lost the 2024 election. Dem politicians talk through PR speak, and they need to be meaner. I have held that opinion for a while. But well, Stephen A didn't actually do any of that. In fact, he pretty much immediately disappointed with his interviews of Democrats, where he doesn't crack down on them even a little bit. He doesn't turn up the heat at all. Mr. Bombastic can't raise his tone in the presence of Eric Adams, a comically corrupt Democrat. If his
Very
attitude was that
corrupt.
he would shake things up, he would have proved it here. But no, this man who's ready to stand 10 toes down on his sports takes is sheepish and tucks his tail between his legs when encountered by real political figures. When just talking about the issues, the same character comes out, only entirely inappropriately.
My only issue with Jimmy Kimmel and this whole brouhaha he finds himself inflamed with
It's not that, oh my God, you can't say a joke. I am incredibly alarmed by what appears to be our First Amendment rights being attacked.
What are you talking about, bro?
This is what I do for a living. I don't like that. But you know he's coming. And you know part of the reason why is to get back at everybody who tried to take him down. They didn't try to keep him out of the White House, and that was it. They tried to throw him in prison. The man is coming.
I understand what he's talking about now.
And you have to adjust accordingly.
Adjust? Adjust what?
Nexstar has to adjust. All these broadcast corporations have to adjust. Madison Avenue has to adjust. Wall Street has to adjust.
Hold on.
Corporate America.
You're saying cater to the White House. No. You do not have to adjust. You do not have to cater to nobody. Anybody. Period. Point blank. Period. Talking about cater.
Has to adjust.
Adjust.
China's had to adjust.
Fuck out of here.
Mexico has had to adjust. France, England, Germany, everybody has to make an adjustment. It's the real world. I don't like it. I'm alarmed by it. I'm scared of it. But I have to march forward. As do all of you. That's what I was saying about Jimmy Kimmel. That's what I'd say.
I
Steve, I hope
question this
everybody
man
else.
sometimes. Good lord.
Part of winning the game is knowing the game you're playing and adjusting accordingly to ensure that when all is said and done, you come out on top.
Grifting?
This reactionary
Is this grifting?
is at the
Hello?
core
Grifting?
of who Stephen A. is.
Is this not grifting?
As anti-journalism as it gets. Oh, the authorities are starting to crack down on speech. Better get ready to adjust. Better get ready to capitulate. Ah, yes. That is the general attitude of journalists. I imagine Stephen A. at like 9 years old on the playground practicing his free throws, and he sees some other kid getting bullied, and instead of helping or tattling, he just walks over to another basket where he doesn't have to watch or get involved.
And adjusting accordingly to ensure that when all is said and done, you come out on top.
This attitude of selfishness, whether it be regarding social norms or greedy profiteering, is not one that is compatible with calling yourself a journalist. The reason that happens is because for Stephen A., politics is just another thing to talk about. Politics is
Stepping stone
to allow him to fill the airwaves with his voice even further. Don't get me wrong.
Stepping stone what? I don't know. But stepping stone nonetheless.
It's his right to do so. And unlike some people, I'm not in the business of declaring what you can and cannot talk about. Like I said earlier, politics affects everybody, and that does include Stephen A. Smith. So he can keep talking away, please, by all means. But another part of free speech is someone else being able to say, hey man,
I don't agree with you.
And yeah, Stephen A.'s
say.
politics fucking suck. He talks about himself like he's up there with Howard Cosell, and later in episode 2 when they discuss politics intermingling with sports and sports commentary, he talks about that being a good thing, even a downright responsibility, and goes as far as to say debate culture was fundamental to it all. But in the compilation of on-air personalities having big and powerful moments using their voice for good causes, Stephen A. doesn't make an appearance. And I think that says a lot in a documentary that is meant to propagate this man. This documentary is supposed to make Stephen A. look good, and they couldn't even dig up more than one clip of Stephen A. Smith making a coherent and substantive point, at least specifically in the moment, because he loves to act like he was a supporter of certain causes after the fact.
I think that he was blackballed. I think that it was unfair what has been done to him.
The one clip included in the compilation is him talking about Colin Kaepernick, but years and years after the actual event went down.
Think about it this way.
Here we are today talking about Colin Kaepernick. We're talking about everything from his hairdo to his socks and anything in between. And he has stolen the spotlight in terms of a subject of this nature from the LeBron James, CP3, Carmelo Anthony, and Dwayne Wade. We were incredibly proud of what they did in terms of their willingness to be conscientious observers and to speak eloquently about the issues, the trials and tribulations that have sullied America to some degree when they opened the ESPYs the way that they did. Now you've got people looking at them and saying, you know what? Everyone agreed with their position. Nobody was disagreeable or could disagree in any regard. So as a result of that reality, how much of a significance was it actually that they did what they did when you juxtapose that to what Colin Kaepernick did? Nobody's judging here. I'm simply presenting the dilemma that exists, because you're going to have people who look at Colin Kaepernick that are completely and unequivocally against everything that he is doing and everything he proclaims to stand for. And then you have another portion of America that's going to stand up and say, we are with him 100%. This is the second coming of Tommy Smith and John Carlos. We applaud him and what he is doing. This is what it's all about. And then you've got the Afro look, and you're thinking that it's reminiscent of the days of the 60s. It's reminiscent of the Black Panthers. I mean, the only thing that was missing was the leather jacket, for crying out loud.
I think Stephen A. Smith knows what he's guilty of deep down. I think he doesn't honestly hold himself as some positive pillar in a storied tradition of journalism, but his ego won't allow him to say that. All it allows him to do is quiet down and shy away from the spotlight for a little bit. And to be fair, that is pretty substantial for someone like Stephen A. Smith. That's about as close to introspection as he seems capable of. But for a documentary, it leaves the thing feeling empty, with more to read in between the lines than in the lines themselves. A documentary that says a whole lot while saying almost nothing. So in a way, I guess it was a pretty apt representation of Stephen A. Smith.
That's a great
Thank
video.
you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it if you made it to the end. Thank you so much.
This is really a good video. I think it kind of discusses some of the same points that I have about sports media in general. Yeah, that's it.
Fuck is you proving? Fuck is you doing? Bitch ass nigga, fuck is you doing? Fuck is you proving? Fuck is you doing? Bitch ass nigga, fuck is you doing? Fuck is you proving? Fuck is you doing? Bitch ass nigga, fuck is you doing?